Thank you for joining another episode of Breaking News with Media Leaders. I can't wait to get this show started today because I have with us Vicki Bradley, the news director with WTXL ABC 27 in Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vicki.
Thank you so much for asking me to be part of this. Excited.
No problem. One thing that I like to do to start off each show is to get my guests to situate themselves for the audience. So just let us know where you come from. How did you get to this point, following that journalism path and leading a newsroom?
Okay, so I came from being in a position where I didn't even know what I wanted to do going into college. I have always been a writer, loved to write, went to college, undeclared major. They had me take a test. They were like, hey, you have to declare a major. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Cool. Do the assessment. They're like, oh, writing is the strong point for you. Go to the communications department. Ended up there, and I met an incredible teacher. Shout out Mr. Davis, who just like naturally thought that I would be a good producer. So I ended up EPing our news. I went to Winston-Salem State first and foremost. So I ended up EPing Ram News. I did that for many semesters. I ended up helping run the student television station my senior year, and they set me up to be in a position to get an internship that really got my foot in the door with a local Fox affiliate, which was really nice. And I just kind of kept working my way up. I did production. I worked in producing. I had a quick stint at the Weather Channel, and it didn't last. Which is actually funny because I was so excited about going to Atlanta, but they were going through like a lot of changes. So they changed a lot of their shows, and I ended up no longer having a job with all the show changes, and it sent me back home. So one thing I want to say, I think when things like that happen, we're like, oh my God, this is horrible, but this was actually a great opportunity for me. Came back home, got into management as an executive producer, worked my way up as an assistant news director, and two news director jobs later, I'm here in Tallahassee.
Oh, wow. That is phenomenal. And I don't think in any of the previous shows we've kind of talked about quick transitions of they laid off, they did this, that, or the
Yeah.
other. So could you dive into that for us a little bit? What was that? What was that like for you in that immediate? And then when did you get to the point where, oh, this is a blessing in disguise for me?
So I think immediately it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, right? Because you're like, I was so happy I had gotten to Atlanta, and then I'm like, I no longer have a job. So I think there was a bit of embarrassment at first. I knew that I was going to come home. I could come home and regroup, right? So that's the best thing about family is that you can come home in most cases and kind of regroup. And I went back to my hometown where I knew a lot of people, and I was able to make connections. And I connected with an old manager that I had who was like, "Hey, we have an opportunity here." I think again the embarrassment of coming back to a market I left because I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to Atlanta, right?" The like just trying to get over my feelings about that wasn't something that I was in for very long because I'm a person who knows what I want and I know I got to push through. I knew I needed a job. So I think it was probably shortly after going to this new station where I was like, this actually worked out for my good. I didn't spend months like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It was kind of like, oh, that hurt, that stinks. I'm going back home. But once I got that opportunity to be an executive producer, which I would not have gotten, where I was, I think that everything happens for a reason, right? And that was my like that's the way I took it. I am a believer in my faith and I believe that there's a path for your life and I believe that certain things happen for certain reasons.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Again, you never know everybody's full story, so I definitely appreciate you sharing that with the audience. Can you tell me and explain for the audience what a news director is and just some of the duties that you carry out?
Cool. So a news director, my biggest job is I feel like my people. Like I feel like that answer for most people probably like, and I make all the decisions and like a big thing is taking care of a group of people. Like I have people that report to me So I kind of have to make sure they're good in their job and they understand what they're supposed to be doing. And when they're not good, I need to be there to kind of help them be good, right? Or coach them through things. Training is a lot. I'm in market 108. So I get a lot of people who've never had their first news job. So a lot of my job is like training them and helping develop them. Overall, when you look at what I kind of do on paper, a part of that really is editorial decisions. I have a say in what we cover each and every day in the news, but I don't do it alone. I have an assistant director. I have my reporters and producers and people who pitch the stories that they think we should cover. But ultimately, I get to make those final decisions. So I am over editorial decisions at our station. I love that I also get to be over some of like our community outreach stuff that we do at the station, which is really important. And I always tell people when they ask me, they want a quick answer. People on television and people behind the scenes in the newsroom, I'm their boss. Um, and I mean that in like such a simple way because if you don't understand news, you don't really get it. But when I say that, people are like, oh, okay. But yeah, so editorial decisions, managing people, growing and developing people, very key to what I do every day.
Okay. Um, I'm glad you mentioned the community service. I pulled a video from your site because I saw you all were honored for your Prepare Now uh, work. So, talk a little more about community service and things that your organization does for the community.
So I think the preparing now is really good. It's a special that we do every year. What's really cool and what's really important about that is that our job as a news organization to make sure people are informed. So the preparing now is our hurricane special Friday, and in the hurricane special, we are educating people about everything you need know as we get ready for the season. There are people who never prepare, right? Or there are people who forget to prepare. They forget the season is coming. So we try to educate them on, hey, here's what to expect this season. Here's how you get ready for the season. Super important. One of our biggest things that we do every year is called a turkey drive. The turkey drive is incredible. I love it. It has become my baby. And with the turkey drive, we team up with the Second Harvest and we collect turkeys and we collect monetary donations and we use that to provide families with meals for Thanksgiving. Last year, we were able to provide 1,000 families meals, and that's super significant and super special. So that's one of the things that we do. Big part of the Second Harvest and working with them, and also Big Brothers, Big Sisters of the Big Ben, another organization that we work with because of mentoring is super important to us. So we've been fortunate enough to award them um, money for the past couple of years that's going to help them be able to get more mentors because obviously there's a lot that goes behind mentoring. So they just the money like any other nonprofit to kind of keep that going. And the other thing that we do that I love, and it's a Scripps thing across the board, we do if you give a child a book campaign. Love this. Literacy is huge for us as a company. It is huge for our station. And what we do is that employees get to pledge money to help buy books for a Title I school. So students. So we've partnered with the same school for the past 3 years, and we've been able to have book drives for them. So excuse me, book fairs. So we actually wrapped our last book fair last week, and we do it twice a year. And each time, it was 600 kids. They got to take home 5 free books. So 10 books
Wow.
from the money that we raise, employees raise at our station, from some community contributions. And then our company, our foundation, Scripps Howard, also gave us money to help purchase those books. Love. Like the literacy, we know that it's been such a struggle for so many people because of the pandemic. And I feel like that's the way we're doing our part to help just a little bit, especially when you look at some of the Title One households where books aren't easily available in the home. So those are the things that we are really that we do, that we love, that we keep doing, that we feel like are helping us be the most impactful in our community.
That's wonderful to hear. I love to, I always love the times that we did things that you could really see the impact on the community. So I can appreciate what you're saying there. One thing that I like to make sure all our guests do is speak to the students. I'm a college professor, and I know that you adjunct at the University of Florida. So help any student that's sitting there right now trying to figure out, I want to do this. I want to get inside somebody's newsroom. Maybe I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I want to get inside of a newsroom. What advice do you have for them?
Reach out, find and connect with people. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is how I've met most people. Find people on LinkedIn and connect with those people because a lot of us are ready to mentor people. A lot of us, would love to mentor and help people, but we need to raise their hands, right? So I think I did an article with someone and I said, raise your hand. So raise your hand. If you want an opportunity to do something, raise your hand. And then seek out those who could put you in touch with the people that you want to connect with or give you opportunities that you might not otherwise get. I tell my students this past semester, I taught personal branding, but we did a lot of job development and job things in that course. And I told my students, like, you don't understand how making connections really connects you. Like, I got my job at UF because I had a connection with someone that started on LinkedIn, which is awesome, right? Because I got my master's. I knew I wanted to teach. I didn't necessarily know which way to go with it. And someone connected with me and they connected me with someone else. And then it all came about for me last semester. So raise your hand. I think you have to apply for internships. Just have to do it, especially if you're thinking of you want to be in a news organization, apply for all the things. I got my first job in news because I applied for an internship. So again, having that foot in the door is super important. So look for those internship opportunities. Paid internships are great, and I think a lot more of us are doing them than before. Like we do one, you might not be able to land one, and I'm not saying, oh, you should just work for free, but is there a station that maybe can't have you as an intern where they'll let you come in shadow? Reach out and see if there are shadow opportunities. I think that those are all things that people might not always think about, that are good ways of getting your foot in the door and making those connections. So raise your hand for all the things. Super important. Be willing to make some sacrifices, right? You may have to come in on a weekend. Like your internship may be a weekend internship. It may be an early morning internship. I will tell my quickie story. Part of my internship when I was in undergrad was working at a station where I was the morning intern. The morning intern, your schedule starts at about 3 a.m. in the morning. Like that is your schedule. On top of that, I was partnered with a reporter who ended up going on maternity leave. And what ended up happening was, and they were like, okay, our photographer is still working. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to send him out to do talk backs. So he's going to go to businesses and places and he's going to mic up people. And he's going to do the situation where they talk back to the people in the studio. So that's essentially what a talk back is that someone is in the field talking back to the station. And they were like, we're going to do like talk backs with him. And they asked me, they were like, do you want to stay with him? I'm like, sure. Let me tell you, I know how to run cables from a live truck to set up a live shot because of this internship. I did not sign up for this. This is not what I thought I was going to do. I wanted to be a producer. And they were like, hey, you're going to work with Jeff. Love Jeff. Jeff killed us, WGHP. They're like, hey, you're going to work with Jeff. And we're going to, you and Jeff are going to go out every morning. And Jeff had me running those live cables. And he didn't make me. But like, if I'm standing there and he's doing something, I'm like, okay, well, I need to be doing something too. I loved it. It was the best thing I've ever done. And I love being able to say, like, I can run cables. Like, I know how to set up live shot. But again, just something that wasn't what I necessarily wanted to do, but it got my foot in the door of that station. And it's probably got me so many more opportunities I didn't realize at the time.
Can you expound on that a little bit? Because I know that you ended up doing more with WGHP. How do you think the impression that you made pulling cables, being willing to be on the morning shift? Everybody's not raising their hand to be on the morning shift.
Oh. So going back to the internship experience is how I landed my first news job with WGHP. So intern experience, I was a news intern. They had a production department, and my EP, Alicia, came to me at the end of my internship, and she said, "Hey, it was the New Year's Eve. She was going to need someone to roll teleprompter, and rolling teleprompter is really rolling teleprompter. The person needed to be in. I think our news went on at 4:30 or either 5 a.m. The person needed to be on just before that, and they needed to run the teleprompter all the way through 10 a.m. when the news went off the air because it was holiday staffing. They were just trying to give people time off. And the end of my internship, and she was like, "Hey, would you be willing to do it?" again, raise your hand, say yes to all the things. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, whatever, I'll do it. Didn't think much about it. Internships over. I had a friend who worked at the station who reached out to me and said, "Hey, the production manager wanted your phone number." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So there's a part-time job, and he asked me who was that intern that came in and ran teleprompter. That is what he wanted to know. He wanted to know who was the intern that came in and ran teleprompter, and would she be interested in a part-time job? And that is how I got my production job at WGHP. I wanted to be a producer, so eventually I ended up leaving there because it was market like 46, 48. I wasn't ready to be a producer. And I went to the North Carolina coast to get my first opportunity producing. And eventually I wanted to go back to WGHP. So because of that connection I made working in production, when I was ready to be a producer in that size market, they hired me back on as a producer. So that was like a really cool opportunity because every experience I had with them was a good experience. I think that's really important too. Like you don't have to love the job, but um, every experience I had with them was a good experience. So they were always very welcoming and open to me coming back and being part of their team. I still have great relationships with so many people that work there, just because of something that started as an internship.
That is phenomenal to hear. I love hearing those stories and being able to share that with our audience because it's those little things. It really is. You hear it over and over again, and no one thinks about those things, but just raising your hand, saying yes. I love that. Another group that I like to make sure that we put a little attention to is early career professionals. Those that they've gotten their foot in the door. Maybe they're a year, 2, 3 in, and maybe it's not feeling the way that they thought it was going to feel because they went to some of those smaller markets or whatever the case may be. What encouragement do you have for them to keep the pace, keep pushing to go after what it is that they wanted to do?
Remember your why. Why did you get into it? What did you want to do? What did you want to accomplish? That is important. I have people who are straight out of college, right? And some of them thought that this job was going to be something completely different because you're transitioning from what you did in college to the day to day grind and expectations that are definitely going to be different than what the expectations were in college. And if I have someone that's struggling or comes to me, which I do like that people will come to me if they're struggling, if I have someone that's struggling, they come to me, I say, okay, let's go back to the why. Why did you choose this career path? What are you hoping to get out of it? In my personal newsroom with people who I know maybe are struggling in the moment, always want to focus on what's next. So, what do you hope to accomplish with this position? So, if you're sitting in a station right now and you're like, this is not what I signed up for, this isn't for me, um, temporary, very temporary, temporary. If there's just a horrible working conditions, that's one thing. But if it's just, I'll use an MMJ for instance. My story pitches didn't get approved, and I really love my stories. Okay, that I understand that, but like, why didn't they get approved, right? Or every day is not going to be like that. Like, there's going to be a time that you pitch a story and you're going to knock it out the park, and that's going to be the story that happens. Or, you know what, you may have had a crappy day where you missed slot, right? But tomorrow's a new day, so you shouldn't be missing slot every day. Like, I think people need to be resilient, and I think you always have to keep in mind, like, what are you trying to achieve? Even in my own personal career, I know what I want to achieve, and I know when I have these moments of toughness and things feel hard, I'm like, okay, Vicki, but where do you want to go? Like, what is your next move? What are you working towards? That's super important. So keep your why in mind. Know that your struggle that you may be feeling right now is only temporary, and figure out keep your why at the center of you do. Hopefully, that will keep you motivated.
I like that. When you talk to some of those that are having the struggles, what are some of the things that, and you mentioned kind of missing slot or maybe not getting their story approved. What are some other things that typically come up and how do you talk them through those?
So other things that may come up that I try to be very proactive on the front end about is schedules. Are new. Anything could happen at any point. I was telling you when I logged on earlier, I worked all night Thursday night because I had an issue at the station and it needed to be handled, and I'm the news director, and that's the expectation. If there's big breaking news and you are a reporter or a producer, there's probably an expectation that you are there and you are in it and you're getting it done. So I think I always tell people when I hire them, before I hire them, do you understand what this industry is? It's 24/7. That does not mean that I expect you to be glued to your phone 24/7. That just means that at any point something could happen that could possibly change your weekend or change your schedule. So I think for some people that's a struggle. Again, smaller market, first job out of college, being away from friends and family can be a struggle. So when looking at jobs, it's really nice, if you are someone who knows that you may struggle with being away from family, that you look at a regional location. You're not probably going to always get the job in your hometown, especially if like you're graduating and you're from Atlanta. Probably not. But there are some smaller markets in Georgia where maybe you land. So I think that's another thing too. And the other thing about being connected, I find is super important is those first jobs. And I can think about my first job when I went to Wilmington, North Carolina, to be a producer. They can be lonely places. You have to take the steps and make the effort to not be that way. What can you get involved with? How can you be engaged in your community? Um, my first, I've been in Tallahassee now 3 years. My first couple of years in Tallahassee, I didn't do really anything. Well, I did a little bit of stuff, but not like a ton of stuff. And mostly because one, I was learning a job. I told you before I was finishing my master's. So I had a lot going on my first year. Second year, pandemic. Well, we all really weren't doing much of anything, right? And when I finally got the opportunity to really get out there again, oh my God, I am so incredibly involved in my community. And it was because I made those steps to find those organizations. Like I'm in Junior League of Tallahassee. And what I love about that is that we are a group of service minded women. Community is a huge focus. Okay. So I know I love community service. That drew me in. For someone who's like, oh, I love animals, go volunteer at the shelter. There are just so many things that you can, but you have to take the steps to do it. So don't wait for anyone to make your life better. Know that you have to take the steps too. And then also, I feel like as companies, we are responsible for helping our employees. So we do like employee engagement cookouts. We do random newsroom things. I have a holiday tree up in my newsroom right now. What is that, you ask? Well, we have a Christmas tree where every season, one of my anchors she decorates it for the season. So we're getting ready now. Like we didn't do Memorial Day, but we're going to do the 4th of July tree coming up. So, I mean, what are the things that, bring you some joy? Like I look at that tree sometimes and I laugh and I smile, and it's always a talking point when people come to visit the station. So I feel like, there are a lot of things that people struggle with, but we have to be responsible for too, looking for solutions. I think that's really important. Like, we can't say, well, it's my job's fault that I don't have a social life. Actually, no, that's not your job's fault unless you're working 24/7. Or we can't say, well, I miss my family and that's my job's fault. Well, like, figure it out. Can you get a trip home once a month? That may be costly, so maybe not. Can you coordinate with your family and friends to fly in? I feel like those are really big things that if you set those up and you plan ahead and you really take those to heart before even accepting the job, will make your experience wherever you go so much more enjoyable.
That is some great information. I think the home piece and that schedule piece are usually the biggest
Yeah.
ones. Uh, since we're kind of in this realm right now, and I had a number of speakers to come to my class. I had a news producing class this last semester, and I had a number of news directors, EPs to come in and speak to the students. And we didn't get a person to leave without getting this question. So let me make sure that I ask you: work life balance. What does that look like for you personally? And how do you try to foster something for your staff?
So I'm like a horrible example of work-life balance, but I am so much better at it now than I was before. I think it is making sure that you find time to do the things that are important to you. So that's what I think about when I think about work-life balance. There has to be a balance between I'm working and I'm also finding time to enjoy life, because when you don't, that is when you burn out and that is when you end up ultimately unhappy. So for me, I actually I said before, I love community service. So I started surrounding myself with people who love community service. I started, being engaged. I just came through a leadership program with the city of Tallahassee called Leadership Tallahassee, and this program actually connected me with so many people who are leaders, but also very different. And they have these different things that they do that I'm now like, oh, I can hang with this person and do this thing, which I find to be really cool. So I think for me, a big thing is, surrounding myself with people who actually force me to have balance because they're like, hey, come do this, right? And these are your friends, and you don't want to tell them no all the time. Or just, I think for me, it got to a point too where I felt like all I ever do is work. I need boundaries. Like, so I am not a person who like I don't check my email at a certain time. That's just not me. I don't think that's realistic. I'm a news director. So, but if you are a reporter or a producer, I would say this. It's okay that after you get home for your shift, unless you're on call, that you're like, okay, I'm done with the emails for the night. Or I may see a text and I may look at it, but I don't necessarily have to respond right then. In my newsroom, I talk to my other managers, and no, we don't do it perfectly because there are times when I'm sure we're not even thinking we will send a quick text message at maybe 8 o'clock at night, right? Because we're like, oh, I'm thinking about this for such and such a story. But I'm like, hey, let's pause because I don't want anyone picking up their phone to have to work, or I don't want them to look at this text and feel like they have to start looking at this story, unless it's like something urgent, right? But I'm like, the way we communicate to our employees has changed a lot because I don't want them to feel like they're always working either. Like I'm always getting texts, I'm always getting emails. Again, we're not perfect. There will be times where you still have to communicate with an employee, maybe in an off hour, but that's not what we do every day. And if I'm doing it, I'm doing it for a reason, right? There may be times when you can allow people more flexibility in their day. So I encourage people to take lunch breaks. I remember being a producer and not wanting to move my butt from my seat because I was like, this show is never going to get on the air. Like, I know the feeling. I of thinking like if I get up and use the bathroom, like my show is not gonna make it on the air today. Like you're laughing. I used to have those real that used to be my feeling like this show is not happening if I go to the bathroom. If I get a drink of water, oh my God, it is just over. We will not have a 6 p.m. news today. Not really the
Amen.
reality. Yeah, that's the reality. So I try to make sure they know too that they are supported. So hey, no, like I need you to take your full lunch break. Like if you get behind, we'll jump in. So I am a very hands-on news director, so I will jump in. I don't want to write guys, but like if you need a story finished because this thing happened, hey, I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna do it. So I feel like making sure as managers, our team knows that they are supported. I have a small staff, a smaller market, so there are probably news directors who don't have that ability to be so hands-on, and that's fine. There are other people in the newsroom. There are EPs, there are assistant news directors. My anchors are really hands-on. Love it. I empower them to really get in the shows, help make decisions, help write stuff for the newscast. So I think that support system is how we give them balance because, hey, I have a doctor's appointment. You know what? You should go to your doctor's appointment. I had someone who had a doctor's appointment and they were trying to come up with all these ways to do their job and do their doctor's appointment. And I'm like, hey, so here's what we can do. We will slide your day back because I know you need to go to this appointment and then you can still get these other things done. So being flexible when you can be flexible is going to be helpful to your employees. I mean, we've had times where people's parents have come in town, they're only in town for like 24 hours or something, and hey, can we adjust my schedule? Or hey, can I do something else? I feel like it's about being flexible. Every single time I get a request, I'm not going to always be able to jump and do it, but I always try to figure out how I can do it or how we can come up with a plan or something to allow people maybe leaving a little earlier, coming in a little bit later, or splitting a day. It just really depends on what's going on.
Do you feel like the pandemic has played a role in how the newsroom culture looks at that whole work-life balance now? Because I can't say that would be the overarching type of mentality a few years ago, even. So do you feel like the pandemic has played a role in that?
For me, no. This is always how I've managed,
Okay.
because this is how I like to be managed. So, I like to be able to go to my GM and say, hey, I have this thing coming up. I need to get out a little bit early today. Or I like to be able to say, hey, just want to let you know I need to start my day a little bit later. And I don't get pushback for those things if they obviously are not interfering with work. And I want my people to be the same way. Because again, my boss has been flexible and fine with things, but there are going to be some times where he's like, no, I really need you here, right? So I'm going to have to be there, and that's going to be okay. But no, I think the culture thing for me with the pandemic is that I was hiring all these people who never got to spend more than maybe 5 hours in a room with me, and then they were off to go home. Um, and for me, that changed the culture and the perception of me as a leader because they're not spending that time with me where we used to be in the editorial meetings and we're cutting up, right? Because you have that time and someone make a random comment and then it becomes a sidebar conversation and you have me on Zoom. And I'm like, okay, let's get it done. Like we obviously tried to engage in Zoom, but I think it's just so different when we hired new people. I think that was a shift for a lot of people because we weren't having that interaction. And I hated that and I missed that. And we have that back in some capacity now. But I think being flexible part of it. Now, I've always been pretty much like, talk to me about what the issue is and let's figure out what we can do about it.
That's good. Let me get you to comment on, because part of breaking news with media leaders is to talk about that leadership path and climbing the leadership ladder. So for those mid-career professionals who are, all right, I've been producing, I've been a reporter, I've been, whatever the case may be, and I think I want to lead. What are some things that they can start doing to climb that rung, to go to the next level?
I feel like first and foremost, you should always look at yourself as a leader, no matter your role in the newsroom. You are a leader. A leader isn't a person just because they're a title. I'm sure people have said this, and I truly mean that. I have people who raise their hands to do things for me, and I'm like, you're a leader because you stepped up and said you wanted to do something. So I would say find the need in the newsroom and be the person that helps try to meet that need. If you are an anchor, because I know anchors now are moving into management. So let's look at an anchor. If you're an anchor and you're thinking, hey, the management track is what I want to do, how are you leading something as simple as the rundown discussions? You have a rundown discussion every single day. And my anchors are they are very vocal in what they like and maybe what they don't like and how we can improve something and how we can do something better. They also turn to their producers and say, hey, I was looking at this story and I think we should do it this way. Or, hey, did we consider doing that thing? So I think you have to lead in the positions you're in. Be the person who is willing to go to your boss and say, hey, I know that project's coming up. This is something that I want to try to tackle. Like this is something that I want to take the lead on. Like for some of our community initiatives, I have anchors that take the lead on that. I have one anchor now who's in charge of our Give a Child a Book campaign. It's her baby. She is the leader of that campaign. There was a call out to see who wanted to be part of the committee. She now is the committee. She leads that. I have another anchor who has taken the lead as basically my nightside EP. He's not my nightside EP, right? On paper, his title is Anchor MMJ, but I look at him as my editorial decision maker at night because he raised his hand and he wanted that opportunity. And I think those for anchors, right? That's how you do it. For a producer, you know how I got my leadership ability and skills and was able to be seen? I used to train up new producers. I would be a producer. We would hire associate producers and I would train them. That is how I was finally able to be at one of my stations. I had an EP who noticed that I was the person who was bringing up these producers, and I was the person that was taking these APs under my wing, and I was this person that was helping. Again, I was a producer, and I was the person that was turning APs into producers. Trainer wasn't my title. We had an EP who still worked with them, but I felt like, hey, this is something that I can do. This is something that I enjoy doing. Let me do it. Any position that you're in where you can help someone along, where you can give guidance, where you can have a voice and you can have a positive impact, insert yourself. Obviously you don't want to overstep. Depending on what it is, you may want to have that conversation with management first. But one, again, raise your hand. Hey, I'm interested in management. I'm interested in being an EP. I'm interested in being a managing editor. I'm interested in being a senior producer. Raise your hand and let people know. One, we do like development plans. So we look at people and we say, okay, what do you want to do next? How can we help you get there? So that's super important too. Your company may be the same. where there's an opportunity for you to work with a manager, work with HR to look at where you go next when you're building your career. But the very first thing you have to do is raise your hand and ask for those opportunities.
I think that's wonderful advice. In the previous interview, uh, Dean Rochelle Ford talked about going after stretch assignments, and that's exactly what you're saying there.
Go for
Yeah. Let's see. What about? I'm going to switch a little bit because I know this is an area that you speak on. I want to talk about DEI in the newsroom and with coverage. What does that look like to you? Why is that something that you speak on? Because I've heard you on panels. So why is that something that you feel is a need?
I did a panel for NABJ last summer, and the panel was, I think, diversity and leadership or something on those lines. And I spoke about like the lack of African Americans or anyone really in a diverse background of being in leadership. And why is that? And I can't speak for everyone, but I was thinking, why that is? Because we've traditionally worked for organizations who didn't give us a real opportunity, who looked at us and turned us down for positions. So, yeah, some of us are a little hesitant to raise our hands or to go for those positions because traditionally we haven't been given those opportunities. I am so happy that, I work for a company where that is so at the core of like who we are to some capacity of like we recognize the importance of inclusion. So much so that we do so many trainings and we bring in guest speakers. And this is as a company, we bring in guest speakers. Most of our stations have those DEI committees who like really focus on those issues within the station and within their news coverage. So our committee does newscast reviews, which why is that significant? Well, they are looking at what we like to achieve and how we want to make sure we're being inclusive and how we want to make sure that our news is inclusive, and they will give us critiques on like where we are and what we're doing. And I think that's very important because sometimes if you're in the news, maybe you don't realize it. But this is like sales department, creative services. These are different people from around the station looking at the product and looking at what we want to achieve and being like, hey, when we looked at this story, this is how we felt about it. Or did we look at doing the story this way? I think that's really important. So first and foremost, it's about holding yourself accountable as a news organization, as a company. Like what are you putting in place is super, super important. And as we've seen since 2020, a lot of organizations are obviously working harder to hold themselves accountable and working harder to make the environment better. And that's just across the board, right? It's not just in for me, I speak about it because there aren't a lot of Black women in news director positions. I don't have the exact number, but there's not a lot of us. And I feel like it's really important for me to be able to speak to that, to be able to speak to that experience. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone work for me who was a Black person who said to me, I've never had a Black manager and they've been in news for X amount of years. Or a person who felt seen because they felt like being who I am and my background helped me. I've had those conversations about hair. It's so crazy. Long before, people were really talking about the way a Black woman's hair should be on TV. I was in a small market in Texas where I had an anchor who asked me could she braid her hair, and I was like, "Of course you can." And this was like 2017, so this wasn't like in 2020 and 2019 maybe when everyone really wanted to have hair conversations. But that's just me and how I approached it. And this person, oh my God, like she is so authentic, and she will tell me what you did for me then helped me to go on and really just be authentic and continue to be authentic because you didn't tell me no, you didn't make me feel bad about it. I've gotten texts from people who've been like, I am so happy to have you as my boss. And it was literally because, well, not just because I'm Black. So let me really take that out and say it wasn't just because, but I think it was because of my understanding of a lot of things for the culture. So that's super important. I think that if I don't talk about a struggle, I wrote an article for RTDNA and it's called News Directing While Black. And I wrote that, I think, because I was just so overwhelmed and I think so heartbroken by everything that was happening. And I'm also in this position of leadership where I have a responsibility not have an opinion, to not have feelings in some cases. But I did have a lot of feelings, and it wasn't because I felt one thing was right or wrong. It was just being in the midst of 2020 and living during that time and actually running the newsroom and having reporters out covering protests and having a black reporter being told by a white man, I'm not gonna interview with you. Like, but I'll interview with this other white reporter. And me having to get that phone call on a Saturday, right? Because I mean my reporter is like free. So not understanding it, so like getting question about it. So I think it's just really important that people understand that representation matters, and I want to continue to tell those stories and continue to talk about representation. And even in our station right now, my management team, two black women, a Hispanic male, and a white woman, and we are all so completely different, and I love it because there are even more differences outside of our skin color too. But those are just the ones where when people come to our station, they feel like they're seen. Or even people like I have someone I hired recently who's not black that was just like, oh my God, this is so awesome. Right. So it's not even just like black employees looking for that representation. Like everyone wants to see that you are trying and you're making sure that voices are represented. So that is why I talk about it. I don't want to be the representative for every black news director, right? Because I'm not. But I just would like to talk about it from my perspective and how I feel and what I'm seeing.
Well, what you all are doing sounds wonderful. Um, I would like to get you to circle back around just a little bit and maybe share kind of practically what that DEI committee that you all have, what are they doing for with their review of the station? So is it just kind of sporadic that they do it? Is this a quarterly thing, or just so that if we got other news directors around the country like, ooh, that sounds interesting?
So we do it quarterly. We're actually building back up the group because people leave, so then you need to get new team members. So our goal is to do it quarterly. They have random shows that have been chosen for them to review. So they look at the show. We have not necessarily a checklist, but yeah, there are things that we want to accomplish that we've set out. Like, here's our goal, and here's what we want to accomplish, and here's what we want to make sure we're doing. How about that? Um, and they look at those things and they look at the product and they some cases some of them have like ratings. Some of the questions would be like very specific questions about what they watched in the newscast, so it's a combination. That committee then gets that information and they put it together and they share it with myself, the GM, and a couple of other news makers, right? And the goal is for us to look at that feedback and say, yes, we're on track. We're doing the things that we set out to do, or oh, didn't realize we were doing that, or oh, we dropped the ball in this story. And I think part of it is, we are really big right now about trying to stay away from mugshots. There's all kinds of reasons why. I don't feel that mugshots need a part of every story, even if the sheriff's office gives it doesn't matter. But I think we've seen like the articles where they've had, one group of people get in trouble for something and here's their pictures, and another group of people get in trouble for something and here's their pictures. Pictures were not the same, right? Kind of slanted the perception of people. But we look at how are we representing people? Are we representing all people the same way? I think that's really important, and it goes back to I've done a lot of leadership training, but it really goes back to the conversations that continue to happen. Do you only go to the black neighborhood when the bad things happen? Don't. But that is making sure that when you look at our newscast, that's not the feeling that you're getting. When you're interviewing someone who is an expert in the healthcare field, are you only going to this one person? Are you not looking for diverse voices? Tallahassee is no, it's probably the largest African American community I've lived in, about 34, 35%. And that should be represented in our news. And if it's not, then we're not doing our job because the news is for the people. The news isn't for us, the news is for them. Our responsibility is to make sure that we're bringing awareness to issues and making sure that we're hopefully helping come about with solutions and showing the positive things that are happening. But if you look at our newscasts and you don't see people who look like you, we're not doing our job with DEI, right? So there are a lot of things that they look at when they're doing DEI. We have, again, across all of our Scripps stations, there's some form of a DEI, plan, accountability, a committee. It's just a little bit different for every station. And I think ours can be stronger, and we're working on it. That's why we're kind of getting a new group of people together. But that is really at the core of what we're doing is how are you making sure that you are covering the news in a way that represents all people? How are you making sure that you're not telling the story with a slant, even if you don't mean to? Sometimes it's easy to do it. How are you making sure that when people look at the news and you're talking about their community, it is not always the horrible things that are happening? Because you know what? There may be a shooting on this street, and 2 days later, there may be a big community festival on the same street. Did we show up for both of them? That's important. Did we only show up for the shooting, or did we show up for this huge community event where all these neighbors got together and the kids are having a great time? We showed up for the shooting. Okay, well, did we show up for the community roundtable where they were talking about what they want to do about the shooting that happened in their neighborhood? Like these things are all very, very important.
Thank you for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. I The title of the show is Breaking News with Media Leaders. So I like to give each of my guests the opportunity to break some news for us. So is there something that you would like to break for us about you, about your company, what have you?
I am hiring. That is not breaking news. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know, but here's what I want to break for people because I know why this is happening. And I think in some cases it's really cool that it's happening, but don't sleep on small markets. There is a lot that happens when you come up through a small market. There's a lot of you learn. There are a lot of times where you think you know everything and you get humbled really quickly. I'd rather be humbled in market 108 than market 45. There's just so many things that you learn and so many different experiences you get when you start in a smaller market. And I know now we are in a time where the smaller market isn't necessarily everybody's path. Like there are people who are able to jump from college to a top 50. I think that's incredible if they're ready for it. And I'm not knocking it because I have seen some great students. Like I know several programs where their students are just killing it and knocking it out the park, and I'm not surprised. But think about what you want to get out of the job, and if you want to go somewhere where you're going to be mentored, excuse me, and somewhere where you feel like people are going to care about you, and for a good company, that's really important. Please consider all market sizes. Consider us little markets. I may be a small market. I work for a really big company, a good company, and I always tell people like you can work your way up within our company. Scripps is everywhere, and I love the things that we're doing within our organization. So I think that's really important too. Is look for the organization that makes the most sense, the one who's really going to be there to support you. And again, market 100 may not be where you aspire to be, but that's not your forever. That's your jumping off point. That's your start. So yeah, I'm hiring weekend anchor, weekend meteorologist, um, and sports. I have a sports opening coming open. So yeah, I have some positions. Reach out to me. I love to talk to you and love to meet you. Love to get you into Scripps because I feel like it's a very bright future if you get the right company. And I found this to be the right company.
I can appreciate that. Thank you for sharing it. Your thoughts on the future of the industry.
It's changing. Um, And if people, especially companies, especially news leaders, if we can't change with it, then we're not going to be in a good position. Just the way that we do news has changed so much. The technology is so much more amazing. Don't be that person who doesn't want to change just for the sake of that's how you've always done it. That is not going to be a good path forward for you. So, there are some things that I wish I saw more of. I don't think there are nearly as many people who want to be reporters anymore like they used to. I think it's a little bit more wanting to be content creators, which I think is a great path forward too. But I really want to people be super passionate again about the industry. There are a lot of us who still are, and I'm not saying that there isn't, but like if you are an educator, if you are someone who can ever reach out and touch a student, get them excited about music. Show them what we can do. be open-minded to some of their ideas about how they think that this industry is changing and how they can contribute to it. Thinking that we're going to keep managing people the way we used to, thinking that the news is going to always look the way it looked 20 years ago is a disservice to all of us. So that is my big thing about the future. Forever changing.
I can appreciate that. Before I let you go, because you've been wonderful today, I ask everyone, and you kind of did this with your breaking news, but if you have a pitch for the audience, and it can be about your station in particular, it can be about your company, but just sell us on working with you and or Scripps.
I think working with me can be a lot of fun. I have expectations. We all have expectations, right? But I'm very upfront with what I expect, and I'm very willing to help train and develop people to get where they want to be. So if you're looking to land within a station straight out of college, or maybe you're a reporter who wants to tap into the anchor waters, Tallahassee will help you grow. I have a great team of other anchors and people who will embrace you and also be very invested in your growth. From a standpoint of a company, if you're someone who's in a company now and you're like, this isn't what I signed up for, look at Scripps. Have openings all over. I found that in my 3 years with the company, they've invested in my future. There's a care about my career growth. I'm not saying I'm going to be with Scripps the rest of my life, but right now it feels pretty good. So if you're looking for an opportunity and you are trying to look at a different, and you want to explore a different company, look at Scripps. I can connect you with a lot of recruiters. I have the inside track. So definitely reach out to me for opportunities. And yeah.
Thank you. Vicki Bradley, you have been a wonderful guest today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
No problem. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining Breaking News with Media Leaders today. I'm your host, Keonte Coleman. I have a couple of guests that I'm trying to book the schedules for right now, so I won't exactly say who they are yet, but make sure that you subscribe and like the channel, and you will find out when I know. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.